Imagine unfolding a centuries-old map, the brittle parchment crackling under your touch, its surface whispering secrets of lost gold and buried civilizations. The cartographer's craft invites us into this enigmatic world, where paper and ink became conduits to unimaginable riches. Each line a promise, each symbol a key to a vault shrouded in time. We journey back to the age of exploration, when the oceans were dark blue mysteries and continents pulsed with untamed potential. Mapmakers stood at the nexus of innovation and aspiration, their craft evolving from rudimentary sketches to sophisticated masterpieces of deception and revelation. Think of the Portolan charts, those intricate mariner's maps with their web-like rum lines and vibrant coastal detailing. These weren't merely guides for sailors. They were silent partners in conquest, transforming watery wastelands into highways of fortune. As explorers like Columbus and Magellan pushed boundaries, treasure maps blossomed from their functional roots, spreading specialized symbology, a skull death, a cross sign salvation, a dragon guarding hordes, or a simple X marking the spot. Yet, these weren't universal codes. They were private lexicons, guarded by cartographers serving Spanish galleons, English privateers, or Dutch adventurers. The enigma deepens as we contrast traditions. European maps, steeped in Renaissance artistry, erupted with elaborate flourishes, mermaids, sea monsters, and intricate compass roses camouflaging the subtle geometric cues to buried wealth beneath layers of cartouche and color. They thrived on ambiguity, inviting both treasure and treachery. In stark contrast, Asian cartographers, particularly from Edo period Japan and Ming Dynasty China, employed a language of precision and subtlety. Japanese maps woven on silk depicted treasure troves with minimalist elegance. Using ceramic seals or vermilion ink washes to denote precious metals, gems, often embedded within scrolls designed for concealment within temple walls or warrior armor. Chinese maps leveraged calligraphy and feng shui principles, suggesting locations harmonious with natural forces or marked with characters like treasure disguised within topographical features. The divergence wasn't merely artistic, it reflected cultural attitudes. Sought dominance through overt territorial markers on maps. While Asian traditions favored encoded secrecy, maps as talismans rather than public declarations, their treasure indicators reserved for initiates who understood the deeper resonance of ink on rice paper. Now, we turn to the physical heart of these documents, the materials that defy time and treachery. Parchment, scraped and stretched from animal hides, was the aristocrat of map substrates. Its fibrous density repelled water, absorbed ink deeply resisting flaking, making it the vessel for the most significant hoards. Think of the famously indestructible vellum maps carried by conquistadors into the Andes, protected by sheepskin covers and tanned with a lump to slow decay. For less affluent seekers, sturdy rag paper, heavy with cotton or linen fibers, was the workhorse. Its rough surface holding ink tenaciously against thieves' attempts to erase markers. Paper maps destined for burial faced harrowing deployment. Cartellers employed ingenious armor, coating with beeswax or mutton tallow to create a flexible water-resistant shield, impregnating with alum or salt brines as microbial deterrents, or embedding maps within hollowed logs sealed with pitch. Desiccant materials like silica-rich sands or powdered charcoal were tucked alongside to absorb ground moisture. The science of materials conservation adds another layer. When recovered from centuries of earth, maps undergo forensic scrutiny. Iron gall ink, the workhorse of treasure cartography, composed of iron sulfate, oak galls, and gum arabic, reveals its age through oxidation. Genuine antique ink bleeds a distinctive brown halo into the paper fibers over time. A slow-motion acid burn becoming a forensic signature. Under ultraviolet light, modern forgeries falter. Their inks fluoresce unnaturally, lacking the deep, mottled patina of genuine antediluvian ink. Conversely, sepia inks derived from cuttlefish or sepia mollusks age gracefully, turning a warm umber resisting the corrosive decay of iron salts. Even the paper tells a tale. Rag paper from the 17th or 18th century exhibits unique chain lines and visible fibers absent from wood pulp paper born later. Radiocarbon dating of these fibers, microscopic analysis of watermarks, and chemical testing of binders authenticate or demolish a map's provenance, transforming a suspect scrap into a verified portal to the past. Yet, even the most beautifully rendered map is haunted by fallibility. Geographical accuracy in pre-satellite epochs was a fragile dream, a dance between observation and imagination. Coastlines drifted westward with each retelling. Mountain ranges bloomed where plains lay, distances shrank or expanded based on hearsay or bravado. These errors weren't mere accidents. Cartographers wove deliberate obfuscation like spiders into their webs. Imagine a map showing a non-existent river branching where none flowed, or a phantom peak looming over the horizon designed to misplace the seeker by a critical league. Identifying such subterfuge requires detective work. Check scale distortions. Does a coastline wiggle unnaturally? Look for anachronistic features. A 19th century fort drawn on a map claiming 17th century origin. Spot the deliberate ambiguities, routes that only make sense if approached at dawn, or symbols aligned with specific constellations at a certain time. The relationship between map error and success is stark. Many legendary failures like the futile hunts on Oak Island guided by flawed schematics stem from literal acceptance. Seekers followed a buried chest marker without questioning the map's distorted geography. The rare triumphs come from reading the asterisk subtext asterisk, understanding that a specific error, the mapmaker placing a lake 1 mile north of its true location, might be the key. Inviting the hunter to discover the asterisk fixed asterisk error is the real landmark. Cartographers weren't just recording. They were scripting narratives where compass direction was a character, ink thickness a clue, and deliberate mistakes the very chapters to the treasure. The Oak Island money pit diagrams offer a chilling lesson in cartographic theater. Emerging after the discovery of an artificial shaft in 1795, these maps proliferated over 2 centuries, each promising the elusive loot of Captain Kidd or Marie Antoinette, the most infamous. Sketched by the Truro Company in 1835, depicts a pit crosshatched with flood tunnels leading ingeniously to a man-made beach, designing a watery tomb for intruders. Yet cartographic analysis exposes inconsistencies. The beach depicted no longer exists, eroded by decades of storms. The angle of the booby tunnels defies hydraulic engineering principles. Symbols shift in complexity between purported eras. Historians posit these maps weren't blueprints but elaborate prospectuses, drawn to bilk investors. Blending real topography, Spiral Beach nearby with fantastical architecture to conjure belief. The true treasure of Oak Island might be the maps themselves, artifacts of grand deception echoing the era's explosive speculation and feverish greed. Then there's the Beale cipher saga, Holy Grail hidden in Virginia, documented in coded documents and sparse sketches purportedly left by Thomas Beale in 1822. The second cipher describes the treasure in gold, silver, and jewels, while the third gives the map location. Only the first cipher, supposedly decipherable using the Declaration of Independence as a key, reveals the existence of all ciphers. Despite attempts to crack the codes, the treasure remains locked away, the associated map described as crude and misplaced, rendered useless without its key. Cartographers note the map's topographical errors. The distance between landmarks doesn't align with Virginia's terrain, suggesting it might be a phantom companion to the cipher or a calculated red herring, ambiguity as the ultimate defense. Finally, the legend of the Lost Dutchman's mine in Arizona's Superstition Mountains. The maps attributed to Jacob Waltz the Dutchman are pure myth distilled into ink. Analysis shows they amalgamate real ridgelines and arches like the Weaver's Needle, a striking volcanic spire with impossible formations and directions that shift like desert mirages depending on the viewer's position. The simple spirals, crosses, and dots are fluid, their meaning aligning perhaps only under the harsh desert sun at the summer solstice. Cartography reveals these maps as fables etched on paper, products of gold rush fever and oral myth enhanced by wishful tourists reality overwritten by the enduring romance of a curse-beset lode. As our journey folds back, these maps linger as more than paper and pigment. They are time capsules brimming with the scent of brine and parchment, the ghost of cartographers' breath lingering on their sketching tables, the weight of gold dreams pressing upon the ink. They speak of navigators who felt dread encircle their hearts as they sketched false coastlines for rivals. A parchment that endured war and wrought to whisper its secrets to us today. The craft was alchemy, turning observation into obsession, geography into legend, durability into immortality. We see now that the true cartography is not about lines on paper, but the human spirit etched upon history, a spirit forever seeking, forever believing, forever drawing the unseen onto the map of possibility. The treasure, perhaps, was never just buried. It was woven into the very fabric of the map, a testament to the audacious, flawed, and beautiful art of charting desire itself. From the dawn of human civilization, our species has been captivated by the allure of hidden wealth, by the intoxicating possibility that untold riches might be lying just beneath our feet, waiting to be discovered. This primal attraction to treasure isn't merely cultural, it's embedded deep within our neural architecture, hardwired into the very fabric of what makes us human. When you envision a treasure map with its curving lines, cryptic symbols, and promises of buried gold, you're not just looking at a piece of paper, you're staring into a window that reveals ancient psychological mechanisms that have driven human curiosity and exploration for millennia. The dopamine pathways in our brain light up at the mere anticipation of reward, creating a neurological jolt that propels us forward, even when the payoff is uncertain. This isn't just modern neuroscience talking. It's an echo of our early ancestors who regularly faced life or death decisions about whether to venture into unknown territories in search of resources. Picture our early human relatives standing at the edge of an unfamiliar forest, weighing the risks of potential danger against the possibility of finding a new source of food or rare materials needed for tools. The same neural circuits that fired in their brains when contemplating that journey are, in essence, the same ones that activate in us today when we pore over a treasure map, tracing the path with our fingers and imagining the moment we might unearth something precious. This deep seated connection between survival and the pursuit of hidden resources helped shape our cognitive development over hundreds of thousands of years. The ability to mentally represent spaces not immediately visible to create cognitive maps of potential treasure troves became a crucial survival tool. Those who could effectively remember locations of seasonal food sources, who could recognize subtle landmarks indicating valuable resources, were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. Consequently, we evolved to be navigation experts, pattern recognizers, and scenario planners, our brains constantly scanning environments for potential rewards or resources. As communities formed and cultures developed, this internal drive began to manifest in our collective storytelling. From Japan's legends of Raigje, the magical dragon palace beneath the sea filled with precious treasures, to Germany's Das Goldenflies, the golden fleece hidden far beyond the known world. Cultures across the globe independently developed similar narratives about hidden wealth. In Ireland, tales of leprechauns guarding their pots of gold beneath rainbows captivated listeners for generations. In the Americas, countless Native American tribes spoke of sacred places laden with ceremonial objects and natural resources. Even in ancient Egypt, elaborate burial practices, which treated the tombs of pharaohs as treasure repositories, reflected this universal human tendency to assign extraordinary value to what is hidden. What's truly remarkable is how these treasure myths, despite emerging in completely different contexts, share striking structural similarities. They typically feature a journey through challenging terrain, the presence of guardians or obstacles, a central prize of immense value, and a moral component where only the virtuous or deserving can succeed. These patterns suggest a fundamental psychological structure underlying our fascination with hidden treasure, a structure that perhaps goes beyond mere cultural transmission and taps into something more universal about the human condition. The treasure map itself emerged as one of humanity's most ingenious psychological tools, a tangible representation of the abstract concept of potential reward. Throughout history, maps have served as more than navigation aids. They function as cultural artifacts carrying the values and worldview of their creators. When we examine historical treasure maps, whether those created by pirates marking their stolen loot, explorers documenting new territories, or simply storytellers crafting fantasies, we're accessing a map that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. On one level, it's a geographic representation. On another, it's a repository of secret knowledge, a psychological contract between the mapmaker and the reader that says, I have information you don't, and if you follow my clues, you might benefit. This inherent asymmetry of knowledge creates a powerful psychological tension that keeps us engaged. Think about it. The appeal of a treasure map isn't necessarily in the treasure itself, but in the special status it confers upon the viewer. By understanding and interpreting the map, you're part of an inner circle, someone who holds a key to something others can't see. This psychological dynamic of exclusive access explains why fake treasure maps remain popular to this day. The pleasure comes from being in the know, from understanding something others don't. These maps also serve as time capsules of their respective eras, erg Meiji. The golden age of piracy in the early 18th century produced not just actual plundered gold maps, but imaginary ones that reflected the economic realities of the time. When precious metals and gemstones represented the ultimate form of wealth, it's no surprise that treasure maps proliferated, promising access to physical wealth that could mean escape from societal constraints. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, treasure hunt narratives experienced another surge in popularity as people clung to fantasies of sudden windfalls that could rescue them from economic devastation. Even today, when our definitions of wealth have expanded to include experiences, relationships, and personal fulfillment, treasure maps continue to evolve, now often symbolizing internal riches rather than material ones. Perhaps most fascinating is how treasure maps function as psychological safety valves for society. They represent the ultimate meritocratic fantasy that, regardless of social standing, birth circumstances, or economic background, anyone who can decipher the clues and overcome the obstacles might achieve something extraordinary. This narrative proved particularly powerful during periods of great inequality or social upheaval, offering psychological comfort that fortune favors the bold rather than the privileged. The modern treasure hunting culture that has emerged from these ancient roots represents something far more complex than simple gold fever. It's become a vibrant subculture with its own rituals, communities, and psychological rewards that often transcend the material benefits of the treasures themselves. Today's treasure hunters might be seeking geocaching containers in suburban parks, following historical clues to Revolutionary War artifacts, or participating in elaborate puzzle hunts that combine cryptography with real-world exploration. What unites these diverse activities is their underlying psychological framework, the treasure hunt as a meaningful quest rather than a mere search. There's something profoundly human about these shared adventures that psychologists would call collective intelligence in action. When enthusiasts gather to analyze clues, share discoveries, and collectively puzzle over mysteries, they're participating in a modern ritual of collaborative problem solving that satisfies deep-seated social and cognitive needs. The satisfaction found in these communities isn't just about finding the prize. It's about the shared experience, the collective aha. Moments that bind participants together in ways few other activities can. Consider the intense loyalty among geocaching enthusiasts who maintain complex online networks, sharing not just coordinates but personal stories and inside jokes that have developed over years of participation. This community building satisfies a fundamental psychological need for belonging while engaging the mind in challenging, rewarding ways. Psychologists who study treasure hunting note the fascinating dynamics of near. This is that tantalizing moment when you believe you found something significant, only to be disappointed. This psychological experience can actually strengthen commitment to the hunt rather than discourage it. It's a phenomenon evidenced in everything from slot machines to lottery tickets. The closer we come to success, the more invested we become. A treasure hunter who follows a trail for hours and almost deciphers the final clue before time runs out often experiences a powerful desire to return and complete the quest. This persistence speaks to a fundamental aspect of human psychology. Our brains don't easily give up on goals we've made significant progress toward, even when faced with setbacks. False discoveries, similarly, can have counterintuitive psychological effects. There's the initial disappointment when a promising lead fizzles out, but this is typically followed by a wave of renewed enthusiasm as hunter regroups and redoubles efforts. This cycle of anticipation, near success, and eventual victory creates a psychological roller coaster that many enthusiasts find deeply satisfying. It's the same phenomenon that makes gaming so addictive, small wins interspersed with occasional misses, but accumulating toward larger victories. The beauty of treasure hunting is that these psychological rewards come with tangible physical activity instead of passive screen time. Perhaps most compelling are the therapeutic dimensions of modern treasure hunting that extend beyond mere entertainment and community. Mental health professionals have increasingly recognized the psychological benefits of treasure hunting activities for managing stress and anxiety. The focused attention required to decipher clues, study maps, and navigate environments creates a form of mindfulness that pulls participants out of their worries and into the present moment. When you're trying to find a specific geocache hidden in a park or following historical clues in your own neighborhood, you're engaged in an activity that demands present moment awareness of your surroundings while stimulating your brain with problem-solving challenges. The direct observation of nature required in many treasure hunting activities provides additional mental health benefits, exposing urban dwellers to green spaces and natural elements they might otherwise miss. For many, treasure hunting serves as a psychological antidote to the overwhelming pace of modern life. It provides structured opportunities for spontaneity and surprise qualities that often get lost in our meticulously scheduled calendars. The open-ended nature of treasure hunting means there's always the possibility of discovery that wasn't planned or expected, creating opportunities for joyful surprise and awe. These experiences, psychologists note, are essential to human well-being, helping us break out of routine and maintain a sense of wonder about the world. As our world becomes increasingly digital, treasure hunting has transformed in fascinating ways, evolving alongside technological innovations while preserving its essential psychological appeal. The introduction of GPS technology in the 1990s revolutionized navigation, but it was the convergence of GPS with smartphones in the late 2000s that truly democratized modern treasure hunting. Suddenly, anyone with a basic smartphone could participate in traditional hide-and-seek activities on a grand scale, with digital coordinates revealing locations of physical caches hidden by others. The psychological impact of this technological transformation has been profound. Where treasure maps traditionally required extensive knowledge of geography, cartography, and topography to interpret, digital treasure hunting offers instant gratification through precise, real-time location tracking. This shift has created what psychologists call the paradox of choice, with much of the puzzle solving removed. The emphasis has shifted from interpreting symbols on paper to finding clever hiding spots and experiencing the thrill of discovery without the extensive preparation once required. Yet the core psychological appeal remains unchanged. The possibility of finding something unexpected in an ordinary place. Modern geocachers might spend weeks preparing for a hunt or simply spontaneously decide to search for nearby caches using an app, but the mental reward centers in their brains light up either way. This adaptability of treasure hunting to modern schedules and attention spans has helped it flourish in an increasingly digitized world. Perhaps most interesting is the emergence of hybrid treasure hunting experiences that combine digital and physical elements. Augmented reality treasure hunts use smartphones to overlay digital clues and rewards onto physical environments, creating uniquely modern forms of exploration. These technologies blend the best of both worlds. They require the same physical engagement and spatial awareness as traditional treasure hunting, while adding digital elements that resonate particularly with younger, tech-native generations. Speaking of digital generations, new forms of virtual treasure hunting have emerged that exist entirely within digital spaces, yet still satisfy the same psychological drives as their physical counterparts. In massive multiplayer online games, players spend countless hours searching for virtual loot that has no real world value, but provides the same psychological rewards of anticipation, discovery, and status attainment. Even social media platforms have incorporated treasure hunt elements, with interactive content where users follow clues to discover special promotional materials or engage communities through collaborative puzzle solving. What psychologists find particularly compelling is how these virtual treasure hunts preserve core aspects of the physical experience while adding digital flourishes that engage different reward pathways. The satisfaction of discovery remains equally potent whether the treasure is physical or virtual, suggesting that our fascination with treasure hunting isn't bound by the physical properties of the treasure itself, but by the psychological journey of the hunt. As we navigate this digital transformation, it's worth considering how technology might be changing the fundamental nature of treasure hunting. While traditional treasure hunting often valued secrecy and protection of physical artifacts, digital treasure hunting tends to encourage sharing and collaboration, with community-built databases of clues and solutions accessible to all. This shift reflects broader changes in how we approach knowledge in our increasingly connected world, suggesting that even as the medium of treasure hunting changes, its role as a vehicle for psychological satisfaction and community building remains constant. The psychology of hidden wealth, as embodied through the enduring appeal of treasure maps, speaks to something fundamental about what makes us human. It's the combination of our neurological wiring for reward anticipation, our cognitive capacity for abstract reasoning, our social drive for connection with others, and our endless curiosity about what might be lurking just beyond our current understanding, whether in unexplored territories of the map or unexamined territories of ourselves. From the earliest human who might have remembered the location of a productive berry patch and shared that knowledge with others, to the child discovering their first geocache with their family, to the gamer finding a rare item in a virtual world. The psychology of treasure hunting bridges across time, cultures, and technologies. What remains constant is the human desire not just for the treasure itself, but for the journey to find it, the knowledge encoded in the clues, and the community formed around shared discovery. As our world continues to change, the treasure maps we carry might transform from physical pieces of paper to pixels on a screen, but the fundamental psychological journey they promise remains the same: the adventure, the challenge, the collaboration, and ultimately, the universal human thrill of discovery. It's a journey that continues to captivate us generation after generation, because it taps into something deep within our collective psyche, the persistent belief that there might always be something wonderful waiting to be found if we only know where to look. And in that simple realization, perhaps lies the greatest treasure of all, the recognition that the hunt itself, with all its psychological rewards and human connections, matters far more than any prize we might uncover along the way. The whisper of metal detectors slicing through ancient soil, the breathless pause as a shovel reveals gleaming edges not seen by human eyes in centuries, the dream of striking gold, of unearthing forgotten history, pulls at the heart of adventurers worldwide. But before the tape measures and trowels touch the ground, a complex tapestry of law, woven across centuries and continents, dictates the rules of the hunt. Welcome to the tangled, often contentious world of treasure hunting's legal framework, a domain where gilded coffins clash with mineral rights, where nations grapple with the ghostly ownership of the past, and where the thrill of discovery collides headlong with the sacred duty of preservation. Forget simplistic notions of finders keepers. Beneath the fertile earth and restless seas lies a labyrinth of regulations defining what, precisely, constitutes treasure, whose rights supersede whose, and the ethical tightrope stretched between profit and patrimony. To understand the battlefield, one must first know the combatants. What, legally speaking, is treasure itself? The answer isn't etched in stone. It's a shape-shifting concept shifting with geography and purpose. Cast your gaze internationally. And frameworks like UNESCO's 1970 Convention on the Means of Prohibiting and Preventing the Illicit Import, Export and Transfer of Ownership of Cultural Property attempt to draw a line. It argues that cultural objects unearthed within a country belong to its people, a declaration of sovereignty over hidden heritage, aiming to stem the flood of looted artifacts into wealthy private collections abroad. Yet the convention's teeth depend entirely on the signatures and fervent enforcement of member nations, creating patchworks of compliance simultaneously. The 2001 UNESCO Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage champions shipwrecks and submerged sites as common heritage to be preserved in situ, safeguarding them from the grasping claws of salvage hunters seeking sunken bullion. Scuba divers descending upon a galleon laden with doubloons aren't just chasing pirate dreams. They're navigating international maritime law that increasingly prioritizes conservation over salvaging. Zoom closer, and national laws diverge wildly, creating a global legal treasure map filled with contradictions. Step onto British Isles soil, and you find the landmark 1996 Treasure Act, a descendant of ancient trove doctrines. Here, the line is relatively clear. Base metal prehistoric objects found in groups. Objects over 300 years old composed of gold, silver, and coins found in hoards over a certain age become treasure trove. The Crown, representing the public, can then claim these items, compensating the finder and landowner fairly. It's a system designed to funnel finds into museums while acknowledging the discoverer's role. Contrast this starkly with the United States, where the ghost of finders keepers lingers, haunted by the reality of complex mineral rights and cultural heritage laws, federal law. Like the Archaeological Resources Protection Act, ARPA protects objects of Native American cultural significance found on federal land, effectively criminalizing their looting. State laws vary wildly. Some states have rigorous permitting processes for anyone seeking artifacts on private or state land, while others have minimal regulations. The notorious treasure in a field scenario pits a farmer who owns the topsoil against an energy company with mineral rights reaching deep below, sometimes millennia below, where dinosaur bones or Native American graves might lie. Who owns the T-Rex fossil? The surface farmer? The company drilling for gas beneath? Or does it belong to the public, the state, the scientific community? The legal distinctions blur further. Is that gleaming Viking sword buried in a Norwegian bog, an artifact demanding preservation? Or is it a relic from a copper mine discovered in Arizona, treated as a mineral resource subject to extraction laws? Is a mammoth skeleton found permafrost a natural resource or a paleontological treasure? The law wrestles constantly with these definitions, struggling to categorize the whispers of the past caught in amber or torn from the earth. Which brings us inevitably to the heart of the conflict. Who owns what? The romantic notion of digging up a chest and riding off into the sunset, rewarded by your sovereign, clashes violently with the modern realities of recorded titles and evolving rights. The legal concept of finders keepers, a playground maxim, possesses only the thin veneer of authority in court. Its limitations are profound and numerous. Imagine yourself walking through a forest, spotted an unusual glint on the ground. You pick up a small, beautifully crafted Roman brooch, clearly ancient. Legally, are you finder entitled to keep it? Perhaps. But what if you were trespassing on private land belonging to someone else? Their ownership of the land likely extends to everything beneath its surface. Your find suddenly becomes their discovery, entitled to compensation at best, potentially nothing at all if they claimed sole rights. And what if you found it on land owned by the government? Your finders keepers fantasy evaporates. The artifact almost certainly becomes government property, held in trust for the public. Complications multiply when mineral rights enter the equation. It's not uncommon for a family to own the surface rights to a farm, the right to grow crops, build barns, and walk the fields while, unbeknownst to them, a mining company owns the mineral rights deep beneath. the farmer discovers a fossilized dinosaur nest. The mining company's drill hits a rich seam of gold-bearing rock. Who rules the rights of the Earth's womb? The mineral rights holder argues their contract grants them everything below a certain depth, including the gold. The surface owner counters they have the right to the soil itself and anything naturally occurring within it. Disputes rage, often landing in court where judges pore over centuries. Old deeds and evolving interpretations of property law, trying to reconcile ancient concepts like Ed Selim, the idea that ownership extends infinitely skywards and downwards, with modern zoning, environmental regulations, and the undeniable reality that ancient artifacts and precious metals can be entangled within geological strata. The battlefield doesn't stop there. Government entities, from local historical societies to federal agencies like the Bureau of Land Management (BLM), claim custodianship over cultural heritage. They assert that artifacts, shipwrecks, and significant paleontological finds belong to the collective patrimony, not to private individuals or corporations whose primary goal might be profit. When a shipwreck laden with gold and silver coins is discovered in international waters or off the coast of a nation asserting jurisdiction, the disputes can become international incidents. Who gets the gold? The salvor who risked everything. The nation whose ancestral waters hold the wreck. The descendants of the original owners. It becomes a high-stakes negotiation blending admiralty law, maritime salvage conventions, and cultural heritage assertions, often resulting in complex revenue-sharing agreements or protracted court battles in jurisdictions like Spain or the United States, where specific laws like the Abandoned Shipwrecks Act grant states ownership of wrecks in their waters. Resolving these tangled claims requires armies of lawyers and judges acting as mediators, forced to parse centuries-old deeds, interpret ambiguous mineral rights clauses, and weigh economic gain against cultural stewardship, all while the treasure itself sits in secure vaults, waiting for the final verdict. This landscape of conflicting rights and definitions inevitably pours fuel onto the ethical fire, igniting a passionate and often bitter debate that resonates far beyond courtroom walls. At its core, it's a clash of worldviews, the commercial treasure hunter driven by the thrill of the chase and the potential for immense wealth, versus the archaeologist driven by the meticulous, science-based quest to uncover the stories hidden within the contextual layers of history. The commercial hunter, equipped with the latest metal detectors and ROVs remotely operated vehicles, can rapidly sweep vast areas, potentially uncovering spectacular finds. Their supporters argue they perform a public service by discovering sites that might otherwise remain hidden, and that their revenue from sales often funds further exploration and even conservation efforts. The archaeologist, however, paints a darker picture. They describe the commercial hunter, often operating without rigorous oversight, as a looter in disguise, someone who excavates sites with a trowel and a sieve for gold coins, then sells the most valuable pieces to the highest bidder, shattering the delicate associations between artifacts, their placement, and the culture that produced them. They argue that a coin plucked from the earth without its surrounding context tells only a fraction of its story, a page ripped from a historical novel. The context, the type of soil beneath it, the artifacts nearby, the depth at which it was found. The room it lay in is the critical, irretrievable data lost when profit-driven excavation strips a site bare. Federal regulations like ARPA in the U.S. exist explicitly to protect this context, imposing strict criminal penalties for the illegal excavation and removal of archaeological resources on federal and Native American lands, drawing a bright legal line against what the state deems destructive exploitation. Yet loopholes exist, enforcement is challenging, and private land ownership often offers less protection, raising the ethical specter that significant parts of our tangible past are being dissolved for private gain rather than understood for collective enlightenment. This tension explodes most poignantly around the issue of reparations and repatriation, the emotionally charged debate surrounding the rightful home of culturally significant artifacts, particularly those stolen during periods of colonialism, conquest, or exploitation. Imagine a stunning Benin bronze mask, looted by British forces in 1897, now resting in a gleaming display case at a major European museum. Legally, the museum might possess it, acquired through decades-old acquisitions or donations. Ethically, however, the Nigerian nations and the descendants of the creators demand its return. They argue it's not merely an object. It's a sacred embodiment of their heritage, a wound inflicted by historical injustice. Similar struggles rage over the Elgin marbles from the Parthenon in Greece held by the British Museum, over indigenous ancestral remains and funerary objects held in universities and institutions worldwide, over the countless treasures spirited away during European colonization of the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. International conventions like UNESCO's 1970 provide tools for nations to request the return of stolen cultural property. But the process is arduous, involving complex provenance research, legal challenges, and often the reluctant consent of institutions loath to part with iconic treasures housed within their walls. The legal frameworks struggle here. Caught between the seemingly absolute nature of property rights acquired often dubiously in the past and the powerful ethical and emerging legal arguments for cultural restitution and the decolonization of heritage. Who legally owns a culture's soul? Can a nation claim artifacts generations after their loss? The answers remain contested, forcing legal systems and global institutions to confront deep-seated historical injustices and redefine concepts of ownership where the stakes are nothing less than identity and justice. To truly grasp the weight and evolution of these legal battles, one need only look at the landmark court cases that etched new precedents, bending the courts of law around the stubborn wills of treasure seekers and the claims of history. Picture the courtroom drama surrounding Sutton, who in 1939, a lone landowner, Mrs. Edith Pretty, curious about the enormous earth mounds on her Suffolk estate, employed local amateur archaeologist Basil Brown. As meticulous work uncovered the ghostly outline of an Anglo-Saxon ship, the significance became undeniable, fearing damage without expertise. She brought in the British Museum. The ensuing excavation revealed one of the most spectacular finds ever in England, a fully intact royal burial chamber filled with gold artifacts, silver tableware, and stunningly intricate treasures untouched by grave robbers for over 1,300 years. Who owned it? Mrs. Pretty. As the landowner, the finder, Basil Brown. The British Museum, which conducted the excavation with expertise. Or did it belong to the Crown as treasure trove? The case wasn't ultimately fought in court due to a unique agreement. Mrs. Pretty donated the find and the land to the nation. Yet this incident wasn't just a treasure. It was a crucible. It highlighted the critical need for expertise, the question of landowner rights versus public interest, and the immense value of context, though resolved peacefully. It laid the groundwork for the more structured legal environment crystallized in the later Treasure Act of 1996. Jump across the Atlantic to the murky depths off the coast of Florida in 1988. Mel Fisher, a legendary and often treasure-hunting pirate of the modern era, had spent 16 years relentlessly hunting the shipwreck of the asterisk Nuestra Señora de Atocha asterisk, a Spanish galleon that sank in 1620 to carrying a king's ransom in gold, silver, and emeralds. Finally, using sonar and relentless determination, his team found it, recovering vast treasures worth hundreds of millions. But Spain, claiming the wreck, was a sovereign Spanish military vessel conducting a judicial mission, filed suit in U.S. federal court asserting ownership under international salvage law and the sovereign immunity doctrine. This became the Asterisk Odyssey Marine Exploration, Inc. An identified shipwrecked vessel asterisk related to the Asterisk Atocha asterisk saga. The legal duel was epic, pitting treasure hunters, property rights, and the doctrine of finders keepers against the historical rights of a foreign nation and the legal arguments of abandoned military wrecks. After years of legal wrangling and negotiation, a complex settlement was reached. Spain acknowledged Fisher's salvage rights for a majority of the Nong, numismatic silver and personal items, while Spain retained rights to the coins and the specific cultural artifacts, effectively sharing the spoils. This case fundamentally shaped modern shipwreck salvage law, forcing courts to define the precise circumstances under which sovereign wrecks lose their status and become subject to salvage, and how the legitimate rights of salvors interact with the sovereign claims of nations and the cultural significance of their lost heritage. It showed the law wasn't static. It was being forged in the high-stakes arena of deep-sea treasure hunting. These landmark battles didn't just settle lawsuits. They reshaped the laws of the land. The Atocha saga directly influenced the implementation and interpretation of the Abandoned Shipwrecks Act of 1987 in the U.S., which asserted state ownership of abandoned shipwrecks in state waters, striking a crucial balance between states' rights and the potential for archaeological preservation versus salvage. Similarly, the ethical fervor generated by international cases, like the return of the Rosetta Stone to Egypt, though complex and ongoing negotiations for artifacts like the Benin bronzes, have spurred legislative changes globally. Nations have enacted stricter cultural property export laws. Museums facing public pressure have developed restitution policies, and UNESCO continues to push for stronger international enforcement mechanisms. Recent years have seen shifts attempting to recognize indigenous perspectives more formally within legal frameworks, acknowledging the often overlooked custodial rights of Native communities over ancestral lands and objects, moving beyond mere ownership towards deeper partnership. Even the seemingly obscure realm of paleontology has seen legal evolution, with states like Montana enacting laws ensuring significant vertebrate fossils found on state land become state property, managed by universities or museums for public benefit, recognizing they are irreplaceable windows into deep time, not just commercial commodities. The law of treasure hunting, therefore, is not a codex written once and for all. It's a living, breathing entity, constantly bending and stretching in response to the discovery of the Whydah or the Black Sea shipwrecks, pushed by ethical campaigns. Rewritten in the chambers of lawmakers influenced by public outcry over repatriation, and reinterpreted in courts grappling with the ghosts of conquest, colonialism, and the enduring human obsession with the glimmer of gold hidden just beneath the surface of the earth and the waves of the sea. The fight isn't just over gold and jewels. It's over the very soul of history, who writes its narrative, and who holds the keys to the past. As long as there are buried secrets and sunken fortunes, the legal framework that governs their unearthing will remain one of the most complex, passionate, and consequential battlefields in the world. The shimmering promise of buried gold, the whispered tales of lost chests, the allure of forgotten riches treasure hunting has always captivated the human spirit, weaving adventure into the very fabric of legend. Yet beneath the romanticism lies a world of rigorous science, a disciplined dance between map and terrain where success hinges not on luck alone, but on the precise application of surveying and navigation techniques. Imagine yourself standing centuries ago, compass in hand, under a vast star, the dusted sky as a seasoned mariner poring over charts that weren't mere drawings, but complex mathematical puzzles. These treasures demanded more than courage. They demanded a command of the earth and cosmos, the secrets of which were encoded in lines, angles, and symbols known only to initiates. Welcome to the science behind the hunt, where every cryptic mark, every compass bearing, every shadow on a map is a breadcrumb laid by the hands of time, waiting for the analytical eye to uncover it. It begins with the masters of the open sea and the lonely trail, the historical navigators who turned the heavens and landmarks into a global grid. Celestial navigation, the ancient art of reading the stars and sun, wasn't just about finding north, it was about pinpointing your exact position on a featureless ocean by measuring the angle of celestial bodies above the horizon. Think of Polaris, the North Star, its position directly over the Earth's axis offering a fixed reference, while constellations like Orion's Belt and the Southern Cross served as cosmic signposts. This required the sextant, an instrument of breathtaking ingenuity, allowing a navigator to capture these angles with precision, then consult intricate tables to convert them into latitude lines. But navigating by the cosmos alone had limitations. A lone star in a black sky couldn't reveal your place along that line. Enter terrestrial navigation, the grounded science of using landmarks, coastlines, and the very terrain itself. Cartographers meticulously recorded lighthouses, distinctive rock formations, headlands, and even the depth and shape of bays onto their maps. Pirates and explorers became proficient in dead reckoning, plotting a course by estimating speed and direction over time, adjusting constantly for the mighty force of wind and the invisible pull of currents. The true revolution, however, came with triangulation, the geometric backbone of treasure mapping. Picture this: a surveyor stands at a known point, say the mouth of a river, sights to prominent, distant features like a specific mountain peak and a lone oak tree on the horizon. Using compass bearings and angular measurements, he creates two lines extending from his position. Now, moving to a second known point, perhaps a village at River's Bend, he repeats the process, citing the same mountain and tree, drawing his own set of lines. Where those lines intersect on the map reveals the precise location of the treasure spot, no matter how treacherous or featureless the intervening land. This wasn't guesswork. It was pure applied geometry, transforming the landscape into a giant math problem. Ancient maps, often sketched on sheepskin or fragile parchment, demonstrated this principle with surprising elegance. A pirate's map might show 3 distinct islands outlined in careful proportion, measured off a coastline using a chain or a rope, and then linked by lines converging at a spot marked with an X. The science lay in maintaining consistency. One chain measured wherever you stood equaled a fixed distance, allowing for relative accuracy even without modern tools. Traditional methods relied heavily on these hand-measured units. The pace of a man, the length of his stride, or the ancient Roman mile of 1,000 paces, well, the sun served as a constant directional guide for east-west orientation. But as times advanced, magnetic compasses with declination charts, a critical correction for the difference between true north and magnetic north, became standard issue for serious treasure seekers, turning wild guesses into calculated journeys across continents and oceans. Yet even with these advancements, mapmakers faced the eternal challenge of representing a three-dimensional world on a flat surface. Cartographers throughout history developed ingenious projection methods, like the Mercator projection, which preserved angles and bearings but distorted size, or the Cassini projection, better for land surveys. Trade secrets abounded. A master cartographer might use harmonic ratios or the golden section hidden within a map's border, subtly encoding scale relationships. This mathematical precision wasn't accidental. It was essential for survival. Imagine a 17th century treasure map detailing a secret cove on an uninhabited island. The cartographer couldn't rely on modern GPS. He used a combination of theodolite sightings for latitude, lunar distances for longitude, a complex chronometer-free method, and pacing distances between landmarks. He'd triangulate every major feature, ensuring that if you found the skeletal tree marked with 3 notches and the tidal pool shaped like a crescent moon, the X marked the spot exactly 20 paces east of the tree behind the pool. This meticulous approach blurred the line between mapmaking and engineering, making each treasure map a testament to human resilience and intellect. But the magic of the map extended far beyond lines of triangulation and compass roses. It resided in the dense forest of symbols waiting to be decoded. Truly legendary treasure maps were never simple roadmaps. They were encrypted puzzles demanding through understanding cartographic symbolism deeply rooted in mathematics, astronomy, and geometry. Look closely at the intricate details engraved or painted onto these artifacts, and you'll discover a hidden language. Symbols weren't arbitrary icons chosen for decoration. They followed mathematical patterns that, once deciphered, revealed precise spatial relationships. Consider a classic pirate map adorned with a skull, a serpent, palm trees, and an X marking the spot. The observant hunter might notice if the serpent's body forms a spiral echoing the golden ratio, or if the angle between the palm tree's trunk and the skull's eye hole directly aligns with a sunken reef. Geometric relationships between symbols were key, perhaps 3 symbols arranged in an equilateral triangle around the X, all precisely the same distance apart, measured with the divider's tool based on a scale hidden in the map's corner. This symmetrical geometry wasn't coincidence. It was the cartographer's way of creating a stable reference grid on the map itself. The most celestial clues often embedded astronomical references directly into the symbols. The position of a crescent moon might not just indicate night travel, but also the phase of the moon when light would strike a specific rock face at dawn, revealing a carving. Alternatively, the bright star Vega could be subtly aligned with a jagged peak on the horizon and a standing stone marking a solstice sunrise. Some mapmakers used the solstices as a giant calendar, for instance. The shadow cast by a particular rock formation at noon on the winter solstice might point directly to the treasure's buried chest. Mathematical patterns also took the form of numerical codes hidden in plain sight. A symbol might incorporate multiple sevens, hinting at a distance measured in sevens of some ancient unit, or feature repeating motifs like dots or crosses whose count dictated a bearing or paces needed. Decoding wasn't a simple case of cracking a substitution cipher. It required translating geometric relationships into actionable commands. Walk 100 paces at 45 degrees. Dig where the morning sun hits the triangular pool at its deepest point. This cryptographic layer turned the map into a multi-layered scientific diagram, combining elements of sacred geometry, navigation mathematics, and observational astronomy. It's a breathtaking fusion, where the beauty of Moorish tile designs meets the pragmatism of military surveying, all condensed onto a single piece of weathered parchment. And without the key to this symbolism, a grasp of those underlying patterns and astronomical operations, the most ornate map remained an impenetrable puzzle, a beautiful dead end, of course. Deciphering the intricate dance between map symbols and real-world location is only half the battle. A hunter standing in the correct geographical wilderness still needs to translate the map's promises into physical steps, a challenge met through the meticulous science of measurement and scale. How far is it to that skull-shaped mountain from the Weeping Willow? How deep might the chest lie buried under centuries of sediment? These answers reside in the map's scale, often the most unassuming yet crucial element embedded within the design. Historically, cartographers employed clever methods to convey distance without written fractions or standardized units. One might see a small, calibrated ruler printed discreetly along the border, with stakes or paces marked at intervals, 10 chains perhaps, with each chain representing 66 feet, a common unit from the old surveyor's chain. Another technique involved a scale bar showing graphic representations of distances, like the length of a rifle, the stride of a horse, or the time it would take to walk between two landmarks at a natural pace. These symbols were more intuitive. They turned arbitrary numbers into tangible references, allowing illiterate sailors or soldiers to gauge paces without complex math. Maintaining accuracy with such tools required remarkable ingenuity and relentless discipline. Surveyors in remote jungles or mountain passes employed chains and ropes, painstakingly measuring every inch across treacherous terrain. They used theodolites for angle measurement, ensuring lines converged correctly. Legend speaks of a Portuguese treasure map sketched in the 1500s, where the cartographer, tasked with mapping a stretch of East African coast, used a team of porters and calibrated ropes to establish a baseline miles long. He then built a network of triangles across the entire region, each leg remeasured multiple times to minimize error. This dedication allowed him to create a remarkably detailed map where hidden coves and anchorages were located with surprising precision, all centuries before satellites. The evolution of scale representation reflects broader technological shifts. Early medieval maps, like the Mappa Mundi, often used symbolic scales. Jerusalem depicted at the center and larger, iconically significant places drawn disproportionately, prioritizing spiritual meaning over physical distance. The age of exploration brought a shift towards practical accuracy. Mercator's projection 1569 revolutionized navigation by allowing straight run lines, enabling sailors to plot constant bearings, though it distorted continental sizes. By the 18th century, Detailed military maps for campaigns like Napoleon's used strict bar scales and triangulation networks, creating a mathematical grid overlay on reality. Think of a treasure map from the American Revolutionary War era. It might show a farmstead, a creek bend, and a hidden spring. The spring would be noted as 20 rods from the creek, a rod being 16.5 feet, and the farm to spring distance perhaps 200 chains, all calculated via an elaborate chain triangulation from a known church steeple miles away. This built-in redundancy ensured the location could be verified even if secondary markers changed. For the hunter today, understanding this historical context is vital. A map using leagues roughly 3 miles demands a very different approach than one using paces approx 3 feet. Symbolic scales, a drawn boot meaning a day's walk, or a cannon denoting a cannon shot's distance, require mental translation into real-world units, often based on the terrain's difficulty. The science here is in interpretation, recognizing whether a symbol represents a unit of length, time, or effort, and cross-referencing it with triangulation points to confirm your measurements are aligned with the precise grid the original cartographer established. It's the difference between wandering aimlessly and striding confidently towards a target obscured by time and foliage. And today, armed with centuries of accumulated wisdom, the modern treasure hunter supplements this deep historical knowledge with an astonishing arsenal of technological marvels that make the invisible visible and the deeply buried accessible. Walk any potential dig site with a modern enthusiast, and you'll replace the brass compass and surveyor chain with gadgets straight from science fiction. Ground-penetrating radar GPR, for instance, functions like geological X-ray vision. Towed across a field or swept low along a floor, this radar projects high-frequency electromagnetic pulses into the earth. Different materials, soil, rock, clay, metal, reflect these pulses back at distinct rates and intensities. Sophisticated software then translates these echoes into detailed subsurface maps, showing voids like buried chambers, disturbed earth indicating past excavations, or even the distinct signature of a metal chest. Imagine standing near an X marked on your 19th century map, surrounded by flat meadow with GPR. You can sweep the area and watch as a screen reveals the unmistakable outline of a rectangular feature 2 feet down, void of soil structure, the very spot your triangulation indicated. Its effectiveness is proven in locating everything from buried shipwrecks along ancient coastlines to forgotten Roman villas beneath city streets. Complementing GPR is the broader field of geophysical surveys employing technologies like magnetometers and resistivity meters. Magnetometers act like super-sensitive metal detectors, measuring tiny variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by disturbances, iron artifacts, fire pits, or even buried steel from a collapsed structure. Equally powerful are resistivity meters, which pass electrical current into the ground through probes. Different soil compositions and buried objects conduct electricity differently. A hidden treasure chamber filled with air creates a high-resistance pocket, while a waterlogged pit shows low resistance. When combined with GIS, Geographic Information Systems software, these datasets create stunningly accurate heat maps or 3D point clouds overlaying the area surveyed, allowing hunters to analyze patterns and pinpoint anomalies with surgical precision. This technological fusion has solved historical puzzles once deemed idle tales. Consider the legend of Spanish gold supposedly buried deep in the Appalachian foothills. A hunter armed with historical maps showing triangulation points and encoded symbols used LiDAR light detection and ranging from drones to first create a hyper-accurate 3D topographical model of the terrain beneath dense forest, revealing ancient roadways or terraces. Next, an Earth-resistant survey map subsurface differences in conductivity across the most promising areas derived from the map's geometry. Finally, targeted excavation, guided by GPR, results at the exact intersection point calculated from triangulation. Unearthed not just coins, but a musket and iron chest matching symbols on a faded 1780s survey map. The impact of digital mapping tools is perhaps even more transformative. Modern cartography software like AutoCAD or specialized GIS platforms allows treasure hunters to digitally recreate and overlay historical maps with satellite imagery, digital elevation models DMIS, and real-time GPS coordinates. This process, known as georeferencing, takes centuries. Old parchment drawn in a local coordinate system and pins its exact points to a global grid using known landmarks. A hunter can now see precisely where that skull-shaped mountain and serpent's tooth rock align on Google Earth, then use their phone's GPS to navigate to those precise locations with meter accuracy. Augmented reality AR apps even let users view historical maps overlaid on their phone's camera feed as they walk, seeing century-old paths materialize over modern streets. Drones equipped with multispectral cameras can survey vast areas rapidly, identifying subtle vegetation discolorations or soil disturbances invisible to the naked eye, often caused by buried objects altering water flow or nutrient levels. This synergy between ancient wisdom and cutting edge tech has made treasure hunting less about superstition and more about data-driven exploration. A modern crew might start with a decoded symbol revealing a solstice alignment, use satellite tracking to find the exact vantage point, deploy ground-penetrating radar to image the subsurface zone, apply resistivity to characterize its composition, and finally, drones to monitor excavation progress, all validated by comparing subsurface features with the artistic geometric precision captured on the original map. It's the ultimate dialogue between the past and present. The cartographer's geometric intellect meeting revolutionary engineering, transforming myths into map locations and locations into tangible discoveries. The thrill remains the sun glinting on a gold coin unearthed, but it's rooted in the thrill of the scientific chase, of outsmarting centuries by mastering the very mathematics that encoded the secret in the first place. In this world, the most valuable treasure isn't gold, it's the human spirit of unyielding curiosity, forever driven to decipher the world's oldest puzzles with the sharpest tools of reason. Imagine, if you can, standing at the edge of a windswept coastline where waves crash against jagged rocks with a rhythm that seems to echo through time, the salty breeze carrying the scent of adventure and the promise of untold riches. This is the world of the modern treasure hunter. A realm where ancient maps intersect with cutting-edge technology, where ordinary people risk their fortunes in the pursuit of extraordinary wealth. But behind the romance and the thrill runs a complex economic engine that drives this global billion-dollar industry forward. A world of financial calculations, market analyses, and risk assessments that determine whether the life of a treasure hunter becomes a tale of triumph or a cautionary lesson in economic downfall. The treasure hunting industry, contrary to what many might assume, represents a significant commercial force worldwide, with an estimated market size that fluctuates between $3 to $5 billion annually, dependent largely on major discoveries and fluctuations in precious metal prices. This sector encompasses everything from individual hobbyists equipped with metal detectors to multinational corporations investing millions in sophisticated underwater operations. At the heart of this diverse landscape lies a fascinating economic dichotomy: the small-scale, passion-driven treasure seekers and the large-scale, data-driven corporate expeditions, each with their own financial models and risk profiles. For the individual treasure hunter, economics often represents both motivation and albatross. Many pursue this not purely for profit, but driven by a combination of historical curiosity, adventure-seeking, and the realistic hope that one discovery might fundamentally change their financial trajectory. The economic calculus here becomes quite personal. A few $1,000s invested in equipment, years of research time, countless hours in the field, all stacked against the remote possibility of uncovering something that could be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions. The financial risk remains asymmetrical. Most hunters spend more than they ever recover. Yet the sheer possibility of that one life-changing find continues to draw new participants into the fold. Corporate treasure hunting entities operate on an entirely different economic scale, with budgets that can reach into the tens of millions of dollars for a single expedition. These established companies, which often operate publicly on stock exchanges, face intense scrutiny from investors who demand returns that justify their substantial investments. Their economic model relies on a portfolio approach, funding numerous projects simultaneously while leveraging technology, historical expertise, and legal frameworks unavailable to individual operators. Unlike the solo hunter who might dream of striking it rich overnight, corporations must demonstrate sustainable returns quarter after quarter, creating interesting tension between the romantic notion of treasure hunting and its concrete financial realities. Hidden costs permeate every aspect of treasure hunting, often catching newcomers unprepared. Beyond the obvious expenses of equipment from basic metal detectors, costing a few $100s too, specialized deep-water sonar systems costing hundreds of thousands, there lie numerous financial pitfalls that can render even a successful discovery financially devastating. Consider the legal landscape. Some jurisdictions claim ownership rights to any artifact discovered within their territorial waters or on state-owned land, potentially leaving discoverers with nothing after years of investment. Then there's the expense of historical research, often requiring specialized knowledge access or expert consultations that can run into thousands of dollars. Insurance represents another significant cost factor, as operations in remote locations with unpredictable environmental conditions necessitate specialized coverage that can consume up to 15% of an expedition's total budget. What many aspiring hunters don't anticipate are the long-term preservation and transportation expenses. Once a significant discovery is made, the costs associated with proper conservation, transportation in specialized protective containers, and secure storage can quickly mount into the hundred thousands. Even after finding treasure, the financial journey has just begun, as the discovered items must be professionally transported, documented, conserved, and eventually sold through appropriate channels, each step adding complexity and expense. This three-dimensional financial maze upfront costs, operational risks, and post-discovery obligations helps explain why the economics of treasure hunting remains accessible primarily to those who either already have substantial resources or who are willing to accept extraordinary financial risks. When a treasure discovery finally happens after months, years, or even decades of searching, a new economic reality emerges. The valuation process that transforms these artifacts from historical curiosities into quantifiable financial assets. Professional appraisers in this unique field navigate a complex intersection of historical significance, material worth, market demand, and legal provenance, creating sometimes wildly divergent valuations for seemingly similar artifacts. The methodologies employed by these specialized experts blend traditional archaeological assessment with contemporary market analysis, often resulting in valuations that capture both the intrinsic monetary value and the historical significance that can dramatically enhance an item's market potential. Metallurgical analysis forms the foundational element of any professional appraisal, particularly for precious metal finds. Specialists assay gold, silver, platinum, and other precious metals with precision instruments that determine purity and weight, establishing a baseline bullion value. However, these raw material values typically represent only a fraction of an artifact's appraised worth, as historical significance, craftsmanship, provenance, and condition create substantial premiums in the marketplace. Ancient coins minted during pivotal historical moments can command prices thousands of times greater than their metal content alone would suggest. While items bearing royal insignia or created by renowned historical figures achieve premium valuations that esteemed collectors and museums equally pursue. Art and artifact evaluation introduces another layer of complexity into the valuation landscape, where condition and desirability dramatically affect market prices. A medieval manuscript might be rendered virtually worthless by water damage, while the same artifact in pristine condition could exceed $1 million at auction. Appraisers carefully document wear, alterations, restoration history, and aesthetic quality factors that collectively influence the final assessment of market value. Moreover, the legal history of ownership carries significant weight. Items with clear provenance and documentation that legally establish the finder's rights typically command higher prices due to reduced beer risk and legal uncertainty. Insurance principles in the treasure protection realm represent a fascinating microcosm of risk assessment, where insurers must calculate odds on items whose rarity and uniqueness render traditional actuarial models insufficient. Specialized art and artifact insurance carriers often employ historians, archaeologists, and security experts in their underwriting process, evaluating not only the item itself, but also the security infrastructure of its storage and display environment. These policies can easily reach six figures for high-value artifacts, with premiums calibrated to the item's appraised value, its historical vulnerability to theft, global market demand, and even geopolitical factors that might affect accessibility or trading potential. The resultant economic reality emerges that protecting discovered treasure can represent its own significant industry involving secure storage facilities, transportation security specialists, and comprehensive insurance coverage, all necessary expenses that savvy discoverers must factor into their post-discovery financial planning. Consider the case of the Saddle Ridge Hoard, discovery of Civil War era gold coins in Sierra Nevada that exemplifies the fascinating economic calculus of treasure valuation. When these 1,427 gold coins surfaced in 2013, appraisers immediately faced challenges determining metal purity, assessing historical significance, evaluating condition, and estimating legal ownership rights. Professional valuation using metallurgical analysis established their weight and gold content, while numismatic experts evaluated their historical context, rarity, collector demand, and condition. The eventual valuation exceeded $10 million, far exceeding their material value, due to the unique circumstances of their discovery and exceptional preservation. This landmark case illustrates how professional appraisal processes transform physical artifacts into recognized financial assets with quantifiable market value and long-term appreciation potential. The economic ripples emanating from a significant treasure discovery extend far beyond the immediate windfall for discoverers, often transforming entire communities and creating unexpected economic booms that reshape local landscapes. When HMS Victory, the legendary British warship sunk in 1744, yielded its hoard of gold coins estimated at $500 million. The broader economic impact grew exponentially as the coastal community hosting recovery operations saw tourism revenues surge by an estimated 37% during the excavation period. Hotels filled to capacity, local restaurants and shops reported record sales, and even peripheral businesses from equipment rental companies to transportation services benefited from the international attention focused on this maritime recovery operation. These treasure-related booms follow recognizable economic patterns. Initial media attention creates a surge in visitor curiosity, followed by sustained interest that transforms the discovery location into a cultural tourism destination. The long-term economic effects can prove remarkably durable, with some treasure discovery sites continuing to generate tourism revenues decades after the original recovery. Consider the community that grew around the discovery of the San Jose galleons in the Caribbean, where nearly 50 years after the initial finding, local dive shops, historical centers, and themed restaurants continue to draw thousands of international visitors annually, all eager to experience the waters where $17 billion in treasure still rests on the ocean floor. This sustained economic activity creates an interesting feedback loop, where community investment in preserving the treasure narrative leads to further visitor interest and increased revenue generation. The economic impact extends beyond direct tourism benefits to create multiplier effects throughout local economies. When a significant discovery is announced, the sudden influx of visitors and media attention stimulates demand for accommodation, dining, transportation, and entertainment services. In many cases, these initial boosts enable local businesses to expand capacity, hire additional staff, and improve infrastructure, all of which strengthen the economic foundation of the community long after the direct treasure-related excitement subsides. The Santiago wreck off the coast of Bermuda provides an excellent example where the recovery operation led to the construction of a maritime heritage museum that now serves as both an educational resource and tourism anchor, generating local employment and distributing economic benefits throughout the service sector. Perhaps most interesting is the economic relationship between treasure discoveries and historical preservation funding. Treasure finds often create a powerful financial mechanism for cultural heritage protection. When private recovery operations uncover historically significant artifacts, a portion of the recovery value frequently flows back into preservation efforts through legal requirements, ethical initiatives, or international agreements. The Antiquities Code of several maritime nations includes provisions directing percentages of recovered valuables toward underwater archaeological research and conservation programs, creating sustainable funding streams that might otherwise not exist. This economic reality transforms potentially destructive recovery operations into vehicles for historical preservation, creating a unique convergence of private enterprise and public heritage interests. The economic calculus shifts dramatically when treasure hunting moves from being an individual pursuit or corporate operation to function as an alternative investment strategy, placing artifacts and precious metals alongside stocks, bonds, and real estate in investment portfolios. While traditional financial advisors might initially dismiss treasure as too volatile and niche, the historical performance of certain collectible treasures suggests otherwise, particularly during economic downturns when tangible assets tend to appreciate as investors seek alternatives to traditional markets. The precious metals market offers perhaps the clearest economic case for treasure as an investment vehicle, with gold having maintained purchasing power for millennia while experiencing relatively consistent performance across economic cycles. Historical analysis of gold prices reveals an immediate price surge during times of geopolitical uncertainty, with artifacts and gold coins often appreciating in inverse correlation to traditional market performance. When the 2008 financial crisis sent stock markets plummeting, rare coins and gold artifacts enjoyed unprecedented appreciation, with certain well-documented historical pieces seeing increases of 40 to 60% in value over the 18-month period of maximum market volatility. This economic performance pattern makes treasure holdings particularly intriguing as portfolio diversifiers, with the potential to hedge against traditional market risks while offering earnings potential beyond simple preservation of purchasing power. The economics of artifact collecting presents a more complex investment landscape where value appreciation stems from multiple factors including rarity, historical significance, condition, and provenance, the very factors that professional appraisers meticulously document and quantify. Unlike precious metals, where industrial demand and mining capacity create relatively straightforward market dynamics, art and artifacts derive value from consumer preference, critical acclaim, cultural significance, and museum endorsement. Consider the economic trajectory of certain rare manuscripts that have appreciated at compound annual rates exceeding 15% over multi-decade holding periods, outperforming even the most successful stocks during equivalent periods. These market rarities operate similarly to blue-chip art investments, where scarcity and institutional interest combine to create substantial long-term appreciation potential. Comparative return analysis between treasure hunting and traditional investment vehicles reveals illuminating insights that challenge conventional wisdom about risk and reward in the investment landscape. While the majority of recorded treasure hunting expeditions complete without significant return, the handful of major discoveries demonstrates returns that few traditional investment opportunities can match. The Whydah recovery, for instance, represents one of the most successful commercial treasure hunting operations in history, with initial investment of approximately $4 million yielding artifacts valued at $400,000. An extraordinary 100-fold return that few venture capital projects or stock market investments could achieve. These outlier returns skew the economic analysis of treasure hunting, much as startup IPOs do for venture capital investing, creating a fascinating parallel between these seemingly disparate investment philosophies. The time horizon represents another critical economic differentiator between traditional investments and treasure hunting, with treasures typically requiring multi-decade holding periods to achieve optimal appreciation potential, unlike stocks that may generate substantial returns in years or even months. This extended time frame creates a liquidity premium in traditional markets, as treasures cannot be quickly converted to cash without potentially sacrificing significant value. However, this economic disadvantage also creates tax efficiencies, as the long-term capital gains treatment often applies to held artifacts, potentially reducing the effective tax burden compared to traditional short-term investment gains. The resulting net economic returns may prove superior to more liquid investments after accounting for tax considerations and market timing advantages. Risk analysis further illuminates the economic considerations of investing in treasures versus traditional assets. Standard portfolio theory emphasizes diversification to mitigate idiosyncratic risk, yet treasure investments ironically derive their greatest value when concentration risks increase, as rare artifacts become dramatically more valuable when owned by dedicated collectors or exhibited by prestigious museums. This economic paradox creates a fascinating investment dynamic where concentration represents both risk and opportunity, with the potential for both catastrophic loss and substantial appreciation contingent on the holder's ability to maintain optimal conditions and establish proven provenance documentation. The insurance costs and security requirements necessary to protect these valuable collections further complicate the economic equation, adding ongoing operational expenses that eat into net returns but which are necessary to maintain asset value. The economic reality of treasure hunting as an investment vehicle emerges when comparing it to traditional alternatives during specific market conditions. During periods of monetary expansion and currency devaluation, tangible assets like gold and historically significant artifacts tend to outperform traditional investments, as they represent intrinsic value independent of currency valuations. The historical record demonstrates this principle clearly, with values for rare artifacts and precious metals increasing markedly during periods of high inflation and currency devaluation, suggesting that a portfolio balanced between traditional and treasure assets might provide superior risk-adjusted returns across diverse economic scenarios. As economic conditions continue evolving globally, with growing uncertainty and international complexities increasing market volatility, the treasure hunting industry adapts with new technologies and methodologies that potentially enhance its economic viability. Sophisticated remote sensing technologies, satellite mapping techniques, and artificial intelligence-enhanced pattern recognition are dramatically reducing discovery costs while increasing success rates, effectively improving the economics of what once represented one of history's riskiest investments. These technological advancements, combined with emerging legal frameworks that recognize commercial treasure hunting as a legitimate economic activity, signal a future where the financial reality of treasure hunting may increasingly intersect with mainstream investment thinking, transforming what once remained the exclusive domain of eccentric adventurers into a recognized asset class with distinct economic characteristics. The ultimate economic reality of treasure hunting, whether as a commercial enterprise or investment strategy, emerges not from potential windfalls but from the calculated appreciation of how these unique assets interact with wider economic forces. When viewed through the lens of market dynamics, valuation methodologies, and comparative analysis with traditional investments, treasures reveal themselves not as relics of the past, but as sophisticated financial instruments with unique characteristics that complement well-diversified portfolios, suggesting that the economics of the hunt may be evolving even as the search for lost treasures continues, reminding us that the intersection of history and finance creates one of the most interesting economic frontiers of our time. Imagine holding in your hands a piece of parchment, yellowed with age and bearing cryptic symbols, faded ink lines suggesting islands and coastlines, perhaps an X marking the spot where untold riches lie buried. This humble representation has captivated imaginations for centuries, evolving from practical navigation tools to indispensable elements of adventure narratives across countless stories. The journey of the treasure map through human storytelling is a fascinating odyssey that mirrors our own changing relationship with exploration, mystery, and the allure of the unknown. It begins not in the pages of adventure novels, but in the practical logbooks and maritime manuals of real life explorers whose writings inadvertently laid the foundation for one of fiction's most beloved tropes. In the days when European powers carved up the globe through exploration and colonial expansion, captains and navigators maintained detailed records of their voyages, charting unknown waters, sketching coastlines, and marking landmarks. These practical maps, found in maritime logbooks and expedition records, were the raw material from which the literary treasure map would emerge. Sailors like Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh documented their discoveries in ways that were meant to serve not only as navigation aids, but as proof of their findings for wary investors back home. The lines and symbols had utilitarian purpose, but the imagination could easily see something more, a promise of wealth, of the otherworldly fortunes rumored to be hidden in distant lands. These genuine documents soon found their way into the popular imagination, transforming from mere record-keeping tools into objects of mystery and desire. But long before these written accounts appeared, the concept of hidden treasure was a fixture of oral tradition carried across generations in folk tales and sea shanties. Sailors gathered in port taverns would share stories of Spanish galleons sunk by hurricanes, taking their glittering cargoes to the ocean floor, of indigenous treasures seized during conquests and then hidden away by conquistadors who feared mutiny, of pirate captains who buried their loot on remote islands with nothing but a hastily drawn map to guide them should they need it later. These oral narratives, rich with adventure and danger, contain the DNA of what would become the treasure map trope, the mysterious object that promises great reward but requires courage and intelligence to obtain. The songs sung during long voyages contained verses about hidden chests, buried gold, and the maps that led to them, embedding these concepts in the culture of maritime communities worldwide. The collision of these oral traditions with the rise of literacy and colonial expansion created a perfect storm for the evolution of the treasure map as a narrative device. As European powers established colonies across the globe, stories circulated about vast wealth from local civilizations that had vanished or been conquered. The Spanish conquistadors' search for El Dorado, the legendary city of gold, captured European imaginations, while stories often circulated about how these treasures had been hidden rather than taken. The famous shipwreck of the Spanish galleon Atocha in 1622, which scattered its cargo of gold, silver, and emeralds across Florida's reefs, created a real world counterpart to the fictional scenarios that would later so captivate readers. Writers and explorers began to document these accounts, and over time, the line between documented exploration and embellished adventure began to blur, setting the stage for the deliberate fictionalization of treasure maps that would soon follow. This transformation was further accelerated by changing attitudes toward exploration and discovery. The Age of Enlightenment brought new ways of thinking about the world, but it also romanticized the past, particularly the perceived romance of exploration and encounters with exotic cultures. Literature began to reflect this dual perspective, presenting the colonizer as both seeker of truth and discoverer of wealth. Early written accounts mixed factual reporting with embellishment, creating a hybrid form that would influence how contemporary writers conceived of treasure maps. The famous Piri Reis map of 1513, which displayed remarkably advanced geographical knowledge for its time, was one such example of how maps could be seen not just as practical tools but as objects of mystery, suggesting knowledge or insight that ordinary people might possess. This blending of the factual and the fantastic opened the door for writers to manipulate maps as literary devices, toggling between realistic presentation and symbolic representation depending on narrative needs. As Europe's colonial ambitions expanded, so too did the mythology surrounding hidden treasure in newly encountered territories. Writers like Hakluyt and Purchas published collections of explorers' accounts that fed public fascination with the mysteries of distant lands. The wealth flowing back to Europe from colony silver from Potosi, gold from Mexico, Spices from Asia fueled dreams of still greater fortunes waiting to be discovered. This created an environment where even skeptics couldn't completely dismiss the possibility of hidden caches of unimaginable wealth. It was within this cultural landscape that the treasure map began its transformation from practical document to narrative device, no longer merely documenting what had been found, but promising what might still be waiting to be discovered. The publishing landscape itself evolved during this period, giving rise to forms of literature that made extensive use of illustrative materials. The travelogue, the explorer's journal, and the geographical treatise all employed maps to convey information, and readers began to associate maps with authority and revelation. By the time Daniel Defoe published Robinson Crusoe in 1719, the map was already established as a familiar element in narratives about exploration and survival. Crusoe's meticulous charts of his island, complete with measurements and observations, were not only practical aids to the narrative but symbolic representations of the protagonist's effort to impose order and meaning on his chaotic circumstances. This masterful use of mapping as both literally and metaphorically significant showed future authors how maps could function as narrative tools themselves, capable of revealing character development, thematic concerns, and plot progression without explicit explanation. The transition from written narrative to truly literary treasure maps reached a watershed moment in the 18th century with the publication of Sinbad the Sailor in the Arabian Nights, which featured not maps but detailed verbal descriptions of journeys that could easily be visualized as maps. Even more influential was Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published in 1883, which would codify many of the conventions that continue to define treasure maps to this day. Between these two works, however, authors across Europe were developing their own approaches to using maps in adventure narratives, creating a rich tapestry of approaches that would culminate in what scholars now consider the golden age of treasure fiction. The 19th century was a period of unprecedented literary output, particularly in the realm of adventure stories, coinciding with the zenith of European colonial expansion. This would prove to be the crucible in which modern treasure map conventions were forged. Writers like Jules Verne, H. Rider Haggard, and later Stevenson created worlds where discovery and adventure drove narratives, and the treasure map emerged as a near-essential element of this genre. These literary treasure maps differed from their maritime predecessors in several important ways. They were often deliberately presented as mysterious documents discovered by chance. They contained deliberate ambiguities that required interpretation, and they connected to plot threads that revealed larger mysteries beyond the mere location of wealth. The relationship between historical events and these fictional developments was both direct and complex. The publication of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species in 1859 challenged conventional views of creation and discovery, influencing adventure narratives by suggesting that humanity's understanding of the world remained incomplete. Similarly, the decline of genuine exploration in the late 19th century, as the world's blank spaces on the map disappeared, fueled a nostalgia for adventure that found expression in literature. Treasure maps became vessels for this nostalgia, offering readers the chance to participate in the romance of exploration from the safety of their armchairs. This psychological function explains why, despite the world having been almost completely charted by this time, fictional treasure maps continued to flourish. They satisfied a hunger for mystery and discovery that was no longer satisfied by reality. Robert Louis Stevenson's contribution to the evolution of treasure maps cannot be overstated. In Treasure Island, Stevenson transformed the treasure map from occasional plot device into central narrative element, complete with its own mythology and conventions. Captain Flint's map, discovered by young Jim Hawkins in an old sea chest, features most of the elements that would become standard in treasure maps for generations to come: an elaborate compass rose, cryptic notations, an X marking the spot, and a distinctive personality that makes it feel like a character in its own right. Stevenson also understood the psychological power of maps, how they create anticipation, suggest possibility, and activate the imagination in ways that pure description could never achieve. by having the characters constantly misinterpret, debate, and try to outsmart the map. Stevenson demonstrated how a seemingly objective document could become a site of subjective interpretation and creative tension, a concept that would influence countless writers in the century to come. Stevenson's work built upon earlier examples while creating something entirely new. The legends of pirates like Blackbeard and Captain Kidd had created a popular mythology of swashbuckling outlaws, but it was Stevenson who gave these mythical figures a narrative home through the treasure map. His characters didn't just follow a map, they had to decode it, interpret it, fight over it, and ultimately be transformed by their quest for its promise. This psychological depth gave the treasure map narrative resonance beyond the simple pursuit of wealth, suggesting that maps could represent not just geographical locations but psychological states, moral journeys, or the search for meaning itself. It is a testament to Stevenson's genius that the specific iconography he created, the dotted line path, the precise X, the cryptic annotations in the margins became so dominant that later authors often felt compelled to either imitate them consciously or rebel against them deliberately, either choice indicating how completely Stevenson had defined the genre. The influence of Stevenson's treasure map conventions extended beyond literature into popular culture and even influenced how historical documents were perceived and interpreted. For example, after the publication of Treasure Island, genuine pirate records and maps from the golden age of piracy, roughly 1650 to 1730, began to be reinterpreted through the fictional lens Stevenson had created. What had been straightforward shipping manifests or coarse sketches were suddenly seen through the romanticized prism of fiction, with people convinced they contained secret codes or hidden meanings that were never actually there. This demonstrates the power of literary invention to reshape our understanding of historical reality, a testament to how deeply the treasure map trope had embedded itself in the cultural consciousness. Other authors of the period experimented with different approaches to the treasure map trope. Rider Haggard in King Solomon's Mines created maps that blended geographical discovery with psychological heroism, using the search for treasure as an opportunity for character development rather than mere plot motivation. Jules Verne in The Illustrated Island and other works used maps that were almost secondary to the scientific and geographical wonders his heroes encountered, suggesting an alternative model where the map represents not wealth but knowledge itself. These different approaches reflected the era's complex relationship between exploration and imagination, between scientific progress and romantic adventure, and they collectively helped expand the possibilities of what a treasure map could represent in narrative terms. The role of illustration began to change during this golden age as well. Earlier adventure books had contained maps primarily as supplements to the text, but works like Treasure Island integrated maps so thoroughly that they became part of the reading experience itself. Stevenson's text constantly refers back to the map, treating it as a textual object that exists alongside the narrative, a technique that would become standard in the genre. Readers found themselves mentally picturing maps even when they weren't shown, creating a mental space where the geography of the story existed independently of the narrative timeline, a technique that gave these stories a unique kind of immersive quality that persists in modern adventure narratives. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the treasure map had become an established convention of adventure fiction, recognizable even by those who had never read Stevenson or his contemporaries. Its conventions were so well known and so widely understood that they could be used ironically, parodied, or subverted, as authors began to play with reader expectations. The treasure map had completed its journey from practical document to literary device, from the practical logbooks of explorers to the imagined treasures of fiction, becoming so thoroughly embedded in our cultural imagination that very few people encounter a map without some residue of this literary association influencing their perception. But the story of the treasure map's evolution had only just begun, as new visual media emerged that would challenge its conventions and expand its possibilities in ways even Stevenson could not have imagined. The early 20th century brought with it a golden age of comic books and animation, Visual media that would force the treasure map to adapt to a new language, one where words were secondary to images and storytelling became a matter of visual sequence rather than linear prose. This transition would prove challenging for the treasure map, which had developed as a textual object whose meaning was clarified through narrative explanation, not easily reducible to static images. Comics faced the particular problem of how to present a map, something meant to be contemplated and studied within the context of a larger narrative when readers encountered it just one panel at a time, often with competing demands for space and attention. Artists and writers rose to this challenge through creative adaptations. In comic strips like Terry and the Pirates, or later comic books featuring characters like Black Hawk or Captain America, treasure maps appeared as angular, bold line drawings that eschewed the delicate detail of their literary counterparts for more graphic representational styles. The conventions remained recognizable: an X, a dotted line path, maybe a ship or compass rose, but the simplicity of the medium forced a visual iconography that needed to be instantly recognizable. This simplification, born of necessity, ironically created a bit of visual shorthand that would later influence how treasure maps were presented even back in literature, creating a fascinating feedback loop between media. One of the most adaptations of treasure maps to visual media occurred in animation, particularly in the work of Walt Disney. In Treasure Island 1950, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh 1977, and especially the Goofy movie 1995, Disney's animators created maps that were not just plot devices, but characters in their own right, complete with personality and animation. These animated maps often featured voices, expressive eyes, and would interact with other characters in ways literal maps could never do. This development suggests a profound evolution. The treasure map had moved from being an inanimate object that characters interacted with to an active element of the narrative itself with its own agency and personality. This anthropomorphization would later pave the way for the self-aware, metafictional treatments of the treasure map that would emerge in the late 20th century. The translation of treasure maps to visual storytelling also raised unique interpretive challenges in literature. A map could be presented ambiguously, with characters debating its meaning in dialogue or through internal monologue. In visual media, especially for younger audiences, this ambiguity had to be made more concrete without losing the sense of mystery. Comic book artists developed visual shorthand, perhaps using an in-panel close-up to show a character's fascinated expression as they examine the map, or cross-hatching areas of mystery to suggest uncertainty without obscuring the image entirely. In animated features, filmmakers use techniques like panning across the map or revealing it in segments to maintain the sense of revelation and discovery that made treasure maps compelling in the first place. These visual adaptations ultimately enriched the treasure map convention by demonstrating how its essential elements could transcend their original medium and still function effectively in entirely different storytelling contexts. Perhaps most significantly, the visual nature of comics and animation created certain iconographic symbols that became standardized in the treasure map genre across all media. These visual conventions, the X marking the spot, the dotted line path, the stylized palm trees and mountains, the distinctive aged paper texture became so deeply ingrained that they were recognized immediately, even in contexts unrelated to their original appearance. This visual language became part of our shared cultural understanding of what a treasure map should look like, to the point where artists could deviate from these conventions for effect or subvert them entirely, knowing that viewers would recognize the reference. The treasure map had evolved from a practical tool to textual device to visual icon, each transformation adding new layers of meaning and reshaping its connection to audiences. The emergence of Saturday morning cartoons in the mid-20th century brought treasure maps to a new generation of viewers in serialized form. Shows like Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, used treasure maps almost as comedy devices, with the mystery being not so much where the treasure was but who really wanted it hidden and why. This shift toward mystery solving adventures rather than straightforward treasure hunting reflected changing cultural attitudes about wealth and heroism. suggesting that the journey itself, deductive reasoning, and overcoming obstacles had replaced the destination as the narrative priority. Yet the treasure map remained central to these stories, though its function had evolved from being a literal guide to wealth to a metaphorical puzzle that required intellectual rather than physical courage to solve. The visual stylization of treasure maps during this period also reflected broader cultural anxieties and aspirations. Mid-century comic book treasure maps often depicted dangerous interiors and hidden passages, reflecting post-war anxieties about the unknown and the subconscious. Conversely, animated treasure maps frequently presented idyllic tropical paradises, embodying the era's fascination with escape and leisure. These subtle variations within a consistent visual vernacular demonstrate how the treasure map became a cultural barometer, reflecting collective hopes and fears even as it maintained its core form as a promise of discovery and reward. With the dawn of the digital age, the evolution of treasure maps entered a new phase, one where the practical document and even its visual representations would undergo a radical transformation in response to new technologies and interactive platforms. The digital environment changed not only how treasure maps were presented, but how they functioned within narratives. As the gap between the reader, user, and the experience narrowed dramatically, whereas literary treasure maps required imaginative engagement and comic book maps relied on sequential visualization, digital treasure maps could actually be followed, decoded, and solved, blurring the line between fiction and reality in ways impossible in previous media. Video games represented perhaps the most significant evolution of the treasure map concept since Stevenson first codified its literary conventions in early text-based adventure games like Colossal Cave Adventure 1976. Treasure maps existed as mere descriptions or coordinates that players had to interpret mentally. By the time of graphical adventures like Monkey Island or The Secret of Monkey Island 1990, these had evolved into interactive visual objects that players could examine, zoom in on, and incorporate into gameplay mechanics. The treasure map in these contexts was no longer just a narrative device, it was a gameplay element, an interface through which players interacted with the game world. This functional transformation had profound implications for how treasure maps were designed, with game developers creating increasingly elaborate cryptographic elements, hidden clues within images, and interactive components that rewarded exploration and puzzle solving rather than mere location. Finding massively multiplayer online games and open-world titles like The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, or Sea of Thieves extended this concept even further, creating treasure maps that functioned as persistent elements within vast virtual worlds. These digital treasure maps often incorporated real-time environmental information, player-generated content, and randomized elements that ensured no two experiences would be exactly alike. In such environments, the treasure map became less a static document and more a dynamic interface between the player and the game world, constantly adapting to reflect both the design intentions of creators and the emergent behaviors of players. This interactivity fundamentally changed the treasure hunting narrative, shifting it from a linear progression across predetermined waypoints to an organic process of exploration and discovery that varied significantly between players. The rise of augmented reality and location-based games like Pokémon Go has created a new frontier for treasure maps, transforming them from representations of destinations into tools for guiding exploration of the real world. Players armed with smartphones navigate physical spaces following digital maps that overlay digital elements onto real environments, a development that has effectively made every location on Earth a potential treasure map location. This expansion of the treasure hunting concept into the fabric of everyday life represents perhaps its most significant evolution yet, moving from the realm of pure fiction into actual lived experience while maintaining its core promise of discovery and reward. What's remarkable about this digital evolution is how many of the traditional symbols and conventions persist despite the dramatic technological shift. The X marking the spot remains instantly recognizable, even when it appears on a glowing screen rather than faded parchment. The dotted line path continues to guide virtual explorers through labyrinthine game worlds. The aged paper texture is often meticulously reproduced digitally to maintain the sense of historical mystery and discovery. This persistence suggests that the treasure map's power derives not from its medium but from its psychological function and object that promises revelation, activates curiosity, and rewards engagement. The digital revolution hasn't replaced these fundamental aspects. It has enhanced them by making the treasure hunt an active, participatory experience rather than a passive one. The interactivity of digital treasure maps has also changed the relationship between character and narrative in ways impossible in traditional media. In literature, characters discover and follow treasure maps, but readers observe from without. In games, players are not just following the map, they are inhabiting the character who follows it, experiencing the triumph and frustration firsthand. This identification has led game designers to use treasure maps not just as plot devices, but as tools for player development, with increasingly complex maps requiring a growing set of skills to interpret and follow. The treasure map narrative in games has thus evolved from a linear path of discovery to a scalable challenge system that accommodates players of varying abilities and preferences, a far cry from the straightforward conventions established by Stevenson over a century earlier. Perhaps most fascinating is how digital platforms have allowed for the democratization of treasure map creation. While historically treasure maps were the province of professional storytellers or game designers, anyone with basic design software can now create and share custom treasure maps with global audiences. This has led to an explosion of specialized map types, from pirate-themed birthday party scavenger hunts to elaborate citywide puzzle hunts that can take days to complete. The treasure map concept has thus escaped its fictional origins entirely, becoming a template for all manner of real-world experiences that blend discovery with play. As we look at the evolution of the treasure map from maritime instrument to digital interface, what emerges is a remarkable consistency of form across radically different media. The X marking the spot, the dotted line path, the cryptic symbols, these elements persist because they work, because they tap into something fundamental in our collective psychology: the thrill of the hunt, the mystery of the unknown, and the joy of discovery. The treasure map has evolved through numerous transformations, but its essence remains the same: a promise of revelation that activates our curiosity and rewards our persistence. From the earliest logbooks of explorers to the most sophisticated digital interfaces, the treasure map continues to capture our imagination because it reminds us that the world still holds secrets worth seeking, mysteries worth untangling, and adventures worth having, whether they're found in the pages of a book, on a screen, or just beyond the next horizon. The air crackled with anticipation as our journey through the annals of treasure-seeking technology begins. A silent whisper of possibilities carried on winds that have rustled ancient scrolls and modern satellites alike. We dive deep into the very heart of how humans have chased elusive riches, and how each technological leap transformed not just the maps we hold, but the very soul of the hunt. Picture it: centuries ago, in the flickering glow of tallow lamps, a cartographer hunched over a wooden block, painstakingly carving intricate lines into oak. This was the birth of pre-digital cartography, a world where every treasure map was a labor of love and secrecy. Early printing techniques like woodcuts and later copperplate etching allowed for limited reproduction. But imagine the frustration. Each map was a fragile piece of art, vulnerable to the greedy eyes of rivals and the ravages of time. The ink, often a murky mix of lampblack, linseed oil, and vinegar, could smear or fade with the first hint of dampness. It was the alchemists of the age who intervened, discovering the indelible properties of iron gall ink brewed from oak galls and ferrous sulfate, which bonded with parchment and vellum, turning words and symbols into enduring testaments. But durability was only part of the puzzle. Concealment was an art form. Folds and creases became deliberate choices, transforming expansive landscapes into compact packets small enough to hide in a boot or sewn into a lining. Maps were sealed with wax imprinted with family crests, or encrypted with invisible inks only revealed by heat or lemon juice, a silent dance between creator and possessor. each fold a layer of protection, every crease a pause in the teller's breath. As centuries advanced, the rise of lithography and steam-powered presses flooded the market with maps, making the Cartier legend accessible yet also demanding more ingenious hiding. Techniques evolved. Maps were meticulously rolled into tight tubes hidden within walking canes, or sandwich it between the leaves of mundane books, their whispers of gold lost to the rustle of paper. Imagine a pirate tracing a finger along a coastline at a dimly lit tavern, the map's worn edges testament to countless hands and voyages, the paper stiff from years of concealment, its secrets guarded as fiercely as any dragon's hoard. Then, as the 19th century dawned, the world flickered with the incandescent spark of change, and the technological turn began to reshape the treasure-hunting landscape. Enter photography, the silent witness that could freeze a moment in time. Imagine the thrill of the first treasure hunter snapping a daguerreotype of newly unearthed coins, their tarnished faces captured forever, or documenting a forgotten inscription on a crumbling wall before it eroded completely. Photography turned ephemeral discoveries into concrete records, allowing hunters to revisit sites through images, to compare, to analyze, without ever leaving their study. It was the dawn of visual evidence, where a single frame could authenticate a claim or spark a new expedition far from home. But the real revolution pulsed in the airwaves, radio technology. Born from the fogs of war and then refined for civilian use, crackled to life in hands of intrepid seekers. Metal detectors, descended from wartime mine locators, began to hum and beep, those electronic pulses translating the hidden language of metal beneath the soil into tangible excitement. Hunted in fields and shorelines, devices such as the beat frequency oscillator transformed silent stretches of land into symphonies of electronic whispers, each found a potential promise of buried treasure. Imagine a hunter at dusk, headphones clamped on, sweeping a coil over a plowed field. The quiet hum suddenly erupting into a sharp, insistent buzz. That was the sound of possibility vibrating in the air. Alongside this, radio communication became the lifeline for teams venturing into remote territories. Imagine a team in the Amazon, miles separated by dense jungle, connected only by crackling transistors, coordinating their grid searches, sharing joys of discovery in real time, the static and voices uniting them, across impossible distances. Yet, even these marvels had limitations. Metal detectors struggled with depth and discrimination, their signals often ambiguous in mineral-rich soils. It was the magnetic anomaly detectors that truly began to map the hidden contours of the Earth. Adapted from military tech designed to detect submerged submarines, these sensitive instruments measured the Earth's natural magnetic field, betraying distortions caused by large metallic objects buried deep below. Picture the scene, a treasure hunter operating a bulky, humming device towed behind a boat off the coast, the screen flickering not with sound, but with visual patterns, interpreting the ghostly signatures of sunken galleons resting on the ocean floor for centuries, their golden cargoes waiting inches away from oblivion. This was not just finding metal. It was reading the planet's own magnetic memories, a technological wonder that allowed hunters to probe deeper and wider than ever before. Then, as we crossed the threshold of the late 20th century, the digital transformation erupted, painting the skies and ground with pixels that redefined meaning. Satellite imagery became the eagle's eye of the modern hunter, orbiting angels gazing down within blinking lenses, transforming geography into a vast, open book. High-resolution cameras peered through clouds, revealing subtle details invisible to the naked eye, ancient pathways ghosting across deserts, discolorations in soil indicating buried structures, or the telltale glint of water disturbing shipwrecks submerged in coral reefs. Imagine scrolling across a computer screen, miles above the Earth, your fingertip tracing a faint, rectilinear anomaly in the Saharan dunes, a pattern invisible from the ground but screaming of possible ruins, of forgotten markets, perhaps even lost chambers beneath the sand. This was treasure hunting without boots on terrain, a vicarious exploration powered by silicon and sunlight. But the real game changer was the arrival of geographic information systems, or GIS, the digital cartographer's ultimate toolkit. GIS swallowed history whole, allowing hunters to layer data like geological strata, overlaying centuries. Old hand-drawn maps with satellite imagery, topographic data, historical land records, and even folk tales georeferenced by GPS coordinates. Suddenly, treasure hunting became multidimensional, a puzzle played in virtual space. Picture a hunter ignoring physical boundaries forever, instead manipulating layers on a screen, seeing where an old pirate trail intersected with a fault line known for mineral seeps, or correlating the spiral marking on a 17th century map with a deep-sea thermal vent discovered by modern oceanographers. GIS didn't just present maps. It synthesized information, turning hypothetical locations into hotspots awaiting validation, revealing patterns that generations of hunters had walked past without seeing. It was the silent computation of legend, probability meeting possibility in glowing lines on a monitor. But why stop at mere maps? Virtual reality stepped in, resurrecting ghosts. Using GIS data and historical blueprints, VR reconstructed lost cities and submerged ports, allowing hunters to don headsets and step into worlds extinguished by time. Imagine standing amidst the bustling harbor of Port Royal before it sank, the air thick with cannon smoke and merchant calls, the VR controller in your hand guiding your avatar to precise locations marked on an ancient recovered map. You could measure distances with a virtual ruler, walk the very streets referenced in a faded logbook, feeling the simulated sun and sea breeze on your skin. This wasn't just visualization. It was temporal tourism, a way to experiencing the past with visceral immediacy, where old maps became literal portals to adventure. As the digital age matured, the horizon shimmered with the promise of future technologies, pushing the boundaries of the unknown. Remote sensing, once the domain of orbiting platforms, now ventures beneath our feet with emerging techniques. Imagine arrays of ground-penetrating radar pulses. Not just meters, but hundreds of meters deep, painting 3D subsurface maps on tablets, revealing chambers, mine shafts, or buried ships with unprecedented clarity. Drones equipped with hyperspectral sensors sweep landscapes, analyzing the precise chemical signatures of disturbed soil, detecting minute traces of metal decay or organic waste from long-lost settlements. It's like seeing the Earth's pulse, its hidden secrets surfacing as colorful fractals on a screen long before a shovel breaks ground. Then there's artificial intelligence, the ghost in the machine that deciphers human whispers and riddles. AI algorithms fed endless archives of historical maps, ancient scripts, and folklore patterns learn to decipher the cryptic symbols and faded notations that stumped scholars for generations. Picture feeding a smudged, damaged pirate map into a neural network. It cross-references the illustrated islands with geological databases, tidal records, and cultural references, pinpointing a specific code with a 94% probability of authenticity, even suggesting tidal windows for safe access. AI becomes the ultimate interpreter, a tireless cryptographer sifting through millennia of human endeavor to separate the coded language of treasure from the noise of time. It verifies provenance, analyzing paper fibers, ink composition, and stylistic markers to certify if that velvet lined chest truly holds the loot from the Golden Hind or a clever forgery. Finally, blockchain technology, the unforgettable ledger of the digital age, offers a revolutionary solution to the ancient problem of proof. Imagine discovering a chest of doubloons. Instead of relying on fragile documents and expert opinions, the treasure's existence, composition, and discovery details are instantly recorded as a unique, encrypted digital token on a blockchain. Every hand that touches it, every test confirming its authenticity, every analysis performed, becomes an immutable entry, creating a transparent, permanent chain of custody. Ownership claims become transparent and legally sound. Provenance unfolds at a click, and the thrill of discovery is verified beyond the shadow of doubt. Blockchain doesn't just track treasure, it redefines permanence, transforming the ephemeral glory of the find into a digital legacy as enduring as the myths it inspired. Through this relentless technological odyssey, from the carved wood blocks of the Renaissance to the quantum leaps of tomorrow, the hunt for treasure remains, a testament to human curiosity and ingenuity. Each innovation, each scientific breakthrough, has peeled back a layer of the world's mysteries, turning whispers on aging paper into resounding echoes in the digital ether. The thrill of the chase has evolved, but the core of the human spark that drives us to seek, to uncover, to believe has never dimmed. It is a journey etched not just on maps, but in the endless march of our own discovery, proving that the greatest treasure is not always gold, but the story of how we find it. As we stand at the precipice of tomorrow, looking back through the lens of centuries, one thing is certain. The map will continue to change, but the adventure will forever be our true North Star. Beneath the gilded promise of untold riches and lost stories, the world of treasure hunting reveals a more complex tapestry woven with environmental threads and ethical quandaries that challenge our perceptions of discovery. Imagine, if you will, the moment when a metal detector's first beep cuts through the silence. The thrill of the hunt igniting in the heart of an adventurer as they traverse landscapes that have remained undisturbed for centuries. This primal call of buried treasure often overshadows the delicate ecological balance that sustains the very ground beneath our feet, where each shovel's plunge sends ripples through ecosystems that have evolved over millennia. As we trace the environmental impact of excavation, we uncover a sobering reality hidden beneath the excitement: the soil. That vibrant tapestry of microorganisms and organic matter that sustains all terrestrial life undergoes profound disturbance when treasure hunting equipment breaks its surface. Each time a metal detector enthusiast or commercial treasure hunter digs, they fracture the intricate network of mycelial threads that form the soil's underground communication system, disrupting the delicate relationships between fungi, bacteria, and larger organisms that work in silent concert beneath our notice. These disturbances create invisible wounds in the landscape, causing soil compaction that alters water infiltration patterns, reduces aeration for plant roots, and diminishes the soil's capacity to sequester carbon, a crucial service that our planet desperately needs in our changing climate. The water table, that hidden reservoir that sustains terrestrial life from below, responds with equal sensitivity to these disruptions. When treasure excavation pits penetrate to depths where water accumulates, they create channels through which precious groundwater can escape or become contaminated. Picture a pristine desert oasis suddenly finding its lifeblood draining away into a newly opened excavation, or a wetland complex losing its water sources as interconnected systems become severed by human intervention. These changes cascade through local environments, affecting everything from plant distribution patterns to animal migration routes. As the new hydrological conditions signal species to relocate, leaving behind ecological vacancies that may never be refilled. Chemical contamination risks add another layer of environmental concern to treasure hunting practices. Historical recovery methods have employed techniques that, while seemingly effective for extraction, leave behind toxic legacies. The use of acids to dissolve surrounding earth, mercury amalgamation to separate precious metals, or chemical treatments to preserve artifacts can introduce toxins into the soil and water systems that linger long after the treasure hunter has departed. In coastal regions, where salty breezes and tidal movements accelerate corrosion processes, the decomposition of abandoned equipment leaches heavy metals into intertidal zones where fragile ecosystems struggle to cope with unnatural concentrations. Meanwhile, the simple act of exposing previously buried materials to oxygen can trigger oxidative processes that unlock locked chemical compounds, releasing them into the surrounding environment where they may bioaccumulate in organisms and eventually reach the human food chain. As we pivot from environmental concerns to cultural preservation considerations, an ethical duality emerges that has long divided the worlds of archaeology and treasure hunting. The Earth serves as both a protective shell and an interpretive context for historical artifacts. Yet commercial treasure recovery often prioritizes extraction over contextual preservation. When an object is wrenched from its archaeological matrix torn from the stratigraphy that bears witness to its creation, use, and eventual deposition, we lose the vital information that could place it within the broader human story. Imagine opening an ancient book, extracting only the gold leaf from its pages, and discarding the words themselves. This essentially describes what happens when artifacts are recovered without proper documentation of their original setting and associations. The relationship between commercial treasure hunting and archaeological knowledge loss forms another critical piece of this ethical puzzle. For every artifact that surfaces through market-driven recovery, the potential scientific understanding it represents diminishes. Without professional recording of archaeological contexts, without controlled excavation methods that preserve horizontal and vertical relationships, artifacts become mere curiosities rather than keys to unlocking past human behaviors. Consider a Roman coin discovered alone versus one found in situ with its companions, in an undisturbed pocket within a dwelling's floor, with associated dating evidence and environmental remains. The first contributes little to historical understanding, while the latter could revolutionize our perception of trade networks or economic systems in that time period. The knowledge gap widens as private collections absorb artifacts that become inaccessible to researchers, their stories lost to the public domain. Addressing these challenges requires implementing comprehensive documentation practices that can mitigate environmental and cultural damage even when recovery cannot be prevented. When excavation becomes unavoidable through necessity or after thorough risk assessment, the ethical approach demands thorough recording processes. Modern technology offers tools that allow for precise three-dimensional mapping of artifacts in their original positions, creation of detailed photographic archives, and standardized cataloging systems that ensure find spots and associations are preserved. Some treasure enthusiasts have embraced these practices, creating platforms where verified discoveries with full contextual information are shared with researchers, bridging the gap between recreational interest and professional archaeology. This collaborative model demonstrates how hobbyists can contribute to our collective understanding while minimizing the negative impacts on both cultural heritage and environmental integrity. The principles of sustainable archaeology emerge as a thoughtful response to these complex challenges, offering methodologies that respect both past and future. Invasive exploration technologies represent the cutting edge of this approach, allowing us to visualize treasures without disturbing their resting places. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, electrical resistivity, and LiDAR systems can reveal underground structures, artifact concentrations, and potential burial sites with remarkable precision, creating detailed digital models that researchers can study and analyze without ever breaking ground. These technologies function as window rather than door, offering glimpses into past human activity while leaving the archaeological record intact. Imagine a medieval battlefield revealed through geoscientific methods, soldiers' positions marked by metal objects, defensive earthworks traced through soil disturbances, and encampments identified through magnetic anomalies. This information gleaned without disturbing a single blade of grass or disturbing the souls of those who perished there. Minimal disturbance techniques in treasure recovery operations, when excavation becomes absolutely necessary, follow a philosophy of surgical precision rather than brute force. Medical technology informs this approach, where tools designed for specific contexts replace generalized digging implements. Modular archaeological screens with appropriate mesh sizes ensure that tiny artifacts are captured while larger material is processed efficiently. Small teams of trained individuals work systematically rather than scattershot, concentrating on limited areas with specialized equipment that minimizes collateral damage. These operations often incorporate topsoil removal technology that preserves biologically rich surface layers for replacement after recovery, maintaining the ecosystem's natural seed bank and microbiological communities with greater effectiveness than traditional methods could hope to achieve. Post-excavation restoration and environmental remediation practices form the final chapter in sustainable treasure recovery, acknowledging that intervention necessitates commitment to restoration. This involves creating detailed reclamation plans that address specific ecosystem components affected by excavation. Water diversion systems are designed to restore natural flow patterns. Soil profiles are reconstructed with appropriate organic matter content and texture reestablished. Native vegetation is reintroduced following guidelines that promote reestablishment of species assemblages rather than monocultures. Some forward-thinking recovery organizations now establish environmental bonds that guarantee funding for these remediation efforts, ensuring that financial commitments follow the same timeline as ecological recovery. The result is not simply a return to baseline conditions, but an enhancement of the area's ecological functionality, with monitoring systems that track recovery over years rather than weeks or months. The conversation around treasure hunting transforms fundamentally when we examine community relations and heritage tourism through the lens of economic benefits versus social disruption. Imagine a sleepy coastal village suddenly thrust into the international spotlight as rare coins from a sunken galleon wash ashore after a storm, creating immediate tourism booms and media attention. While such situations promise economic windfalls through increased visitor spending, accommodation demand, and local business revenue, they equally bring social dislocations that ripple through community structures. The sudden influx of outsiders, often with different values and expectations, can strain local resources and traditions. Property values skyrocket, potentially displacing long-term residents who find themselves priced out of neighborhoods where families have lived for generations. Cultural practices that evolved slowly over centuries may become commodified for tourist consumption, losing their authentic meaning in the process. Indigenous perspectives on traditional lands and buried treasures represent a crucial multicultural dimension often overlooked in conventional treasure hunting discourse. For indigenous communities, the ground beneath our feet frequently holds not just material treasures, but spiritual significance, ancestral remains, and connections to creation narratives that predate colonial settlement by millennia. The unearthing of certain artifacts or disturbance of burial grounds can trigger spiritual distress that extends beyond immediate environmental concerns. Oral traditions maintained through countless generations may contain encoded knowledge about specific locations that are forbidden or require particular protocols for access. When treasure hunters arrive with equipment and attitudes that reflect different worldviews, these boundaries invisible in Western cultural maps become sources of profound misunderstanding and conflict. Successful integration of indigenous perspectives requires moving beyond consultation to genuine partnership, where traditional owners guide the discovery process according to culturally appropriate protocols that respect these ancient wisdom traditions. Creating sustainable models for treasure discovery that benefit local populations demands innovative approaches that distribute benefits equitably while enhancing, rather than diminishing, community values. Some progressive programs establish heritage tourism cooperatives where community members guide the discovery process, share in financial returns, and maintain stewardship responsibilities. Others develop educational programs that transform treasure recovery into learning opportunities, turning excavation sites into outdoor classrooms where students of all ages gain hands-on experience in scientific methodology while contributing to our collective historical understanding. Ethical collectors increasingly prioritize investment in local infrastructure, funding everything from museum exhibits that preserve treasures in country to sustainable development initiatives that support community priorities. The most successful approaches recognize that authentic heritage cannot be mined and exported. Rather, it exists as a living relationship between people, place, and historical memory, where discovery enriches those connections rather than severing them. The true measure of any treasure hunting operation ultimately becomes found not in the value of artifacts recovered, but in the quality of the relationships forged between discoverers, communities, and environments. As we stand at the crossroads between preservation and recovery, between discovery and destruction, we have an opportunity to reimagine how we engage with our shared cultural and natural heritage. The most profound treasures may not be those that glitter under museum lights, but rather the sustainable practices we adopt to uncover them, the ethical frameworks we establish to guide our exploration, and the futures we protect through conscientious stewardship. When the echoes of discovery fade away and the next generation considers their relationship with the past, will they inherit a legacy of respect and wisdom, or one of exploitation and regret? The answer lies not beneath our feet in the earth we excavate, but in the values we carry within us as we approach the delicate art of recovering history itself.